So my boss and my mentor and my brother and my comrade in the struggle, Khaled Alexander, called me about an hour ago and said, do you want to go to the Men Gay Museum and moderate a conversation? And I was in a hoodie and trying to decide what taco I was going to eat for lunch. So please give me grace and mercy in this process. Also, Khaled is a man who is a son of a Black Panther. He is a respected advocate in Southeast San Diego and has been doing work there for years, and I am not those things, if you haven't been able to tell yet. I am a white woman who works at Pillars of the Community, and I just want to say before we start this conversation, the fact that we have two white women on stage talking about race, talking about rap lyrics, at the very least is privilege, at the very worst is white supremacy manifesting itself in this moment. So we are two white people struggling towards a conversation about race, and luckily enough, it looks like we have our fellow comrades, people of color who embody this stuff that we're talking about every day, because you can be as down as you want to be till the police come, right, Truth? Right. That's right. So to talk briefly, or to set the stage a little bit about our conversation, and our album, Reclaiming the Community album, was created with this idea that in Southeast San Diego, we often are victim to outside organizations, white-led organizations coming into our community and telling us what our problem is and how to solve it. And we just had this feeling, this notion that maybe we knew what our problem was and how to solve it. And one of the ways we talk about rap is that it's an oral history. And it's an oral history of a phoenix rising from the ashes, right? And that's how we talk about hip hop. One of the things I love about academics, especially academics that research things like hip hop, is they're able to spell out things that Black people I love have been telling me for my entire generation are true, and all of a sudden it's much more accepted in different audiences, right? So this idea that hip hop is an art form in which we talk about white supremacy, in which we talk about what it means to be people that are oppressed by systems, and what it means to overcome those oppressions within our community. And that's really what the Reclaiming the Community album was about. And I'm staring at you, Truth, because if there's anything you want to add here that I'm not saying, please let me know as an artist from the album and from the community. That's really what our album was about. And I believe that's really what the case of Tiny Do was about. And that's really what gang documentation is about. It's about criminalization of culture. That our whole criminal justice system has said, if you're poor and you're Black, we're going to police what you wear, we're going to police the way you talk to one another, and we're going to police your art form. And if you dare talk about the realities of your life, violent or not, we will threaten you with life in prison, which is what TD faced. So that's what happened here in San Diego. And I think I'm going to shut up now and start asking you questions because you're the expert. No, I don't know about that. I should say really quickly, though, before, I just want to make sure, I gave Tiny Do's on his way, and when he gets here, I want him to say whatever he wants to say. But I want to say that out of that case, and folks here may have remembered the Justice for SD 33 case. Out of that case, they took Bonnie Dumanis. I should send her a thank you card, because she turned a gangster rapper into an activist. She took a gangster rapper and turned him into Malcolm, because now we have all sorts of folks in our community saying, you know, basta, enough is enough. You can no longer say that because how we speak or where we're from or a zip code, you can lock us up and throw away the key. So out of that came Justice for SD33, and Brandon has just been ripping and running and organizing folks on the street to make sure that this doesn't happen to other people. So I want to make sure I honor the work that he's done. Okay, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
So some neighborhoods, some zip codes and groups are disproportionately represented in arrest. Here in San Diego, we saw the data came out 2 years ago, and Blacks in San Diego are 3 times as likely to get stopped, twice as likely to be arrested. Latinos are twice as likely to be stopped, 1.5 times as likely to be arrested. So what specific challenges does this reflect at the intersection of race, place, poverty, and our country's region's unique history?
Well, I think that's really important to acknowledge, is that there is variation in these practices across communities, first of all, that is not natural variation. It is variation that is very closely linked with race and place. And I actually do a lot of neighborhood research on crime. And what you find is that these disproportionately high stop rates occur in the areas and communities of cities that are the most impoverished and often have the highest concentration of racial minorities. And so some people will go, well, that's where the crime is. You send the police there, that's where the crime is. Criminologists know from self-report surveys and victimization surveys that crime is much more evenly distributed across different populations, so different classes, different neighborhoods. But when you look at official statistics and who's being arrested, we see a much, much broader gap between the rich and the poor and the white and the non-white. And I think a lot of that reflects assumptions about where we're going to target our efforts, our law enforcement efforts. Mostly street crime as opposed to what I call sweet crime, right? And I mean, I do this exercise when I teach my undergraduate at UCI. You know, why do we have these foci? Why do we focus in these communities necessarily if there's a much more even distribution of crime across the population? And part of it is a lot of assumptions and stereotypes that we have. I have my students close their eyes, first day of class, close their eyes and envision a criminal. And I say, don't tell me anything, just close your eyes and picture a criminal in your mind. And then I have them write down on a scrap of paper what the crime was and what the person looked like. And I've been doing this experiment. I have data over 15 years because I've been doing this experiment. I would say close to 100% of the time, it is a street crime, okay? And it is a person of color that they envision, and they admit it, and they realize. And I say, well, why didn't you put down fraud or white-collar crime or other forms of crime that are, you know, especially like when the Enron scandal was going on, right? I said, that's in the news. And so we investigate these perceptions and stereotypes that I think help inform a lot of the practices and policies that create these statistics.
Does the criminal have sagging pants too in their imagery?
that is often correlated with that. Yes. So
we talked a little briefly before we got up here on stage, so full confession that we spoke already. But one of the reasons why they were able to do what they did to Tiny do is because he was a documented gang member. Mm-hmm. And that's a challenge that the community of Southeast faces that's particular to California. Right? Not every state in the union decides your fate by putting you on a list. So can you talk, we kind of got into it over there in the chairs, but can you talk a little bit about, you think, the judicial system's anxiety about tying musicians to gangs and all of the baggage that language comes with?
Sure, and I want to preface my comment by saying I have a lot of admiration and respect for the police officers and prosecutors who are working very hard to stop crime and to prevent crime, and I acknowledge that. That's a tough job, and my concern, though, is that the sort of far-reaching consequences of some of the practices, and particularly with respect to putting rap on trial. So in California, which happens to be ground zero for this practice, so most of the cases I've been involved in occur up and down the coast in California, and several in San Diego, as you mentioned. What the prosecutors are trying to do is basically argue that rap groups or rappers are involved in gangs or are gang members. And they're using the rap videos, rap lyrics in particular, to prove that. And so they'll send me videos. I'll get called for these cases where rappers are making videos in their local neighborhood. For those of you that don't know, rap is a very localized form of artistic expression. So rappers are very proud of the neighborhoods they come from. So they might have the cross streets in their video. They might be mentioning the names of the area where they live, stating affiliation to particular areas, and prosecutors are automatically assuming, well, look, that's gang affiliation. And so one of the things I've been trying to do is say, look, let's be careful about how we interpret these cultural cues that you're talking about. Because if you don't know the sort of poetic devices about rap, it's easy to conflate gangs and rappers, right? And I go back and I talk about Africa Bambaataa and the founding of the Zulu Nation and the fact that rap and hip hop was seen as a way to stop a lot of the gang violence, right? But there's a long history there that needs to be acknowledged. I'm absolutely fine with prosecutors trying to do the right thing. It's when they're taking shortcuts or making assumptions and stereotypes in order to fight a case or to win a case. My attitude is, look, if a person's guilty, find the evidence, put the person away. But if your evidence is rap lyrics, you don't have a case. That's really my standpoint on this.
Just a little background on that real quickly. It is not a crime in California to be a member of a gang, and you do never have to actually commit a crime to be put on the gang database. So you can be documented by law enforcement, put on a database for the colors you wear, for the neighborhood you were born in, for being seen with your brother on the block, for having a Facebook photo, and that can determine your destiny when it comes to the courtroom.